The ultrasound photo tore in half between his fingers, and Elena Hart felt her heart rip with it. "It's not my child," Damon Vale snarled, his voice colder than the gun on his hip. "Get out before I make you disappear." She stumbled back, one hand on her belly, tears burning her cheeks. The most dangerous man in the city had just denied his own blood. Before we go further, please subscribe to the channel. Follow this story to the very end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The paper fluttered to the marble floor in two jagged pieces, and for a moment Elena Hart couldn't breathe. She stood in the middle of Damon Vale's penthouse office, the same office where 6 months ago he had pressed her against the window and whispered that he loved her in a voice rough with something close to desperation. The same office where he had once promised her, with his lips against her temple, that nothing in this world would ever take her from him. And now, in that same room with the same man, the floor seemed to tilt sideways under her feet. "Damon," she whispered, her voice cracking. Please look at me." He didn't. He turned his back to her, walked to the bar cart by the window, and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. His hand was steady. That was the part that broke her. His hand was steady, like he hadn't just torn apart the first picture of their child. Like he hadn't just looked her in the eyes and called her a liar. "I told you to leave, Elena. I'm carrying your baby. You're carrying somebody's baby." He turned and his eyes were black, hollowed out, dead. She had seen those eyes before, but never aimed at her. Those were the eyes he wore when he was about to ruin a man's life. "It just isn't mine." She felt the tears come hot and silent. She didn't wipe them. She wanted him to see them. She wanted him to look at what he was doing to her and not be able to look away. "You don't mean that," she said. "Damon, I have never been with anyone but you. Not once, not in 2 years, not before, not after, not..." "Stop. I'm telling you the truth. Stop." His voice cracked through the room like a whip, and she flinched. She hated that she flinched. She hated that her body still remembered to be afraid of him, even when her heart was screaming that this couldn't be real, that this had to be some kind of nightmare she was about to wake up from. He set the glass down. He hadn't even taken a sip. "Elena." His voice was lower now, quieter, somehow worse. "I cannot have children. Do you understand that I have known this for years, years before I ever met you? So whatever this is," he gestured at the torn ultrasound on the floor, "whatever you're trying to pull, whoever told you this would work, whoever you're protecting. There's no one else. Don't lie to me." He slammed his hand down on the desk and the glass jumped, and so did she. The whiskey sloshed over the rim and ran down the polished wood in a slow amber line. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elena bent down very slowly like a woman much older than 26 and picked up the 2 halves of the ultrasound. She held them together in her palm, the jagged tear running right down the middle of the tiny grayscale shape that was their daughter. 8 weeks old, the size of a raspberry, the doctor had said with a smile. Elena had laughed and cried in the same breath in that exam room. She had driven straight here, straight from the clinic, with the photo pressed to her chest like a holy thing. She had thought he would cry. She had thought he would pull her into his arms and bury his face in her hair and tell her that everything was going to be all right. She had imagined it the whole drive over. She had imagined the way his hand would tremble against her stomach. She had imagined him whispering, "We're going to be okay, baby. We're going to be a family." She had not imagined this. "Damon," her voice was barely a thread, "I'm begging you, please, just listen to me for 1 minute. Whatever the doctor told you, they were wrong. There's a baby. There's a real living baby inside me, and she is yours, and I came here because I love you, and I thought..." "You thought wrong." He said it like it was nothing, like he was telling her the time. "Get out of my building, Elena." "Damon, Marco will see you out." "Damon, please." But he was already turning away, already lifting the phone, already speaking in that flat businesslike voice he used when he was disappearing into the part of himself she could never reach. And Elena Hart stood there with the broken pieces of her daughter's first picture in her hand and felt something inside her chest go very, very still. It was not heartbreak. Heartbreak was loud. Heartbreak was screaming and throwing things and falling to your knees. This was quieter. This was the slow, surgical understanding that the man she had loved for 2 years was not the man she had thought he was, and he never had been, and he never would be. She put the pieces of the ultrasound in her coat pocket. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, and she walked out of his office without saying another word. Marco was waiting by the elevator. Marco, who had driven her to dinner 100 times. Marco, who had brought her flowers on her birthday because Damon was running late and didn't want her to think he had forgotten. Marco, who could not look at her now. Ma'am, don't, Marco. Don't. He swallowed. He pressed the elevator button. He kept his eyes on the floor. When the door slid open, she stepped inside, and she did not turn around, and she did not look back, and she did not let a single sound come out of her mouth until she was 3 blocks away in her own car with the doors locked and the windows up. And then she screamed. She screamed until her throat tore. She screamed until her hands hurt from gripping the wheel. She screamed in a language that wasn't words, that was just pain pouring out of her in long, ragged waves, until finally she folded forward over the steering wheel and sobbed so hard she thought she was going to be sick. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look at it. It buzzed again. She didn't look at it. When she finally lifted her head, her makeup was running in black streaks down her face, and her hair was a disaster, and her hand was shaking so badly she could barely turn the key. And there in the cup holder, her phone screen was lit up with a single text message. Damon, don't ever come near me again. Elena Hart stared at those 7 words for a long time. Then she put the car in drive, and she pulled away from the curb, and she did not cry again. Not that night. Not for a long time after. She didn't go home. Home was the apartment Damon had bought for her on the Upper East Side, the one with the doorman who knew her by name, and the kitchen she had never learned to cook in because Damon always insisted they go out. Home was full of his clothes in her closet and his cologne on her pillow, and 1,000 small, ordinary things that would gut her the moment she walked through the door. She drove until she ran out of gas. She didn't even know what borough she was in. Some quiet street, some flickering street light, some 24-hour diner with a cracked window and a sign that said breakfast all day. She went inside. She sat at the counter. She ordered coffee she couldn't drink because she wasn't supposed to have caffeine anymore, and she stared at the steam rising off the mug, and she thought, okay, what now? The waitress was an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Ruth. She refilled the coffee Elena hadn't touched and said very gently, Honey, are you all right? Elena opened her mouth to say yes. She always said yes. She had been saying yes her whole life to her father, who left, to her mother, who drank, to the foster homes, to the bosses who underpaid her, to the boyfriend who hit her once when she was 19, to the man who had just torn up a picture of her unborn daughter. But this time something shifted in her chest, and what came out of her mouth was no, I'm not. Ruth nodded slowly. She didn't ask questions. She just slid a piece of pie across the counter and said, On the house, sweetheart. You eat that. You don't have to talk. Elena ate the pie. It was apple. It was warm. She cried into it quietly, and Ruth pretended not to notice, and somewhere between the 3rd bite and the 4th, Elena Hart made a decision that would change the entire trajectory of her life. She was going to keep this baby. She was going to keep this baby, and she was going to raise her, and Damon Vale was never ever going to know where to find them. That night, she drove back to the city. She did not go to the penthouse apartment. She went to her old studio in Queens, the one she had been quietly paying rent on for 2 years, even after Damon had moved her uptown, because some small voice in the back of her head had always whispered, Don't burn this, just in case. She had never told him about it. She thanked God for that voice now. She unlocked the door with shaking fingers. The studio smelled like dust and old paint and the faint, sweet ghost of the lavender candles she used to burn before he came along. There was no doorman. There was no security. There was a fold-out couch and a hot plate and a window that opened onto a fire escape where a stray cat sometimes came to sleep. It was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. She sat down on the couch in her coat. She put her hand on her stomach, and for the first time all night, she let herself talk to her daughter. Hey, baby, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. Hey, I know it's been a really bad day. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She closed her eyes. Your daddy, her throat closed up. She forced the words out. Your daddy is not going to be in our lives. I know that's not what I told you this morning. I know I promised. I'm sorry. She breathed in. She breathed out. But I'm going to be enough, okay? I am going to be your mom and your dad and your everything, and we are going to be all right. We are Going to be so all right. I love you. I love you so much already. I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my entire life. Her hand pressed gently against her belly. And no one, she whispered, is ever going to hurt you. Not ever. I swear it on my life. She didn't sleep. She sat up all night with her phone in her hand, watching the messages come in. Damon called twice. He didn't leave voicemails. He texted, "We need to talk," and then 20 minutes later, Elena pick up, and then nothing for an hour, and then I'm sending Marco to the apartment. She let him. Marco would find the apartment empty. He would find her clothes still hanging in the closet, her toothbrush still in the bathroom, her engagement ring, the ring that Damon had given her after 8 months together, the ring she had said yes to with tears in her eyes, sitting on the kitchen counter on top of a single piece of paper that said in her handwriting, "I hope you're happy." She knew Damon. She knew exactly what he was going to do next. He was going to send people looking for her. He was going to check her credit cards, her bank accounts, her phone records. He was going to call every friend she had, and when that didn't work, he was going to call every friend she'd ever had. So at 5 in the morning, she walked to a payphone 3 blocks from her studio, and she called the only person in the world she still trusted. "Maggie," she said when the voice on the other end picked up groggily. "Maggie, it's me. Don't say my name out loud. Just listen." There was a beat of silence. "Oh my God," Maggie whispered. "What did he do?" Elena closed her eyes. "I need to disappear," she said. "I need to disappear, and I need you to never, ever tell anyone you've heard from me. Not your husband, not your mother, not the priest, not the cops. Nobody. Do you understand, Elena? Do you understand?" A long silence. Then very quietly, "Yes, I understand. Tell me what you need." Maggie wired her $4,000 from a credit card that wasn't in her name. Maggie's cousin, who ran a used car lot in New Jersey, sold Elena a 15-year-old Honda for cash and didn't ask any questions. By the end of that week, Elena Hart had a new phone, a new bank account, and a name on the lease of a small one-bedroom apartment in a town 3 states away that nobody who knew her would ever think to look in. She got a job at a bookstore. She painted the second bedroom pale yellow. She cried in the shower most mornings because she was so tired and so scared, and her hormones were a hurricane, and there were nights when she would wake up at 3 in the morning with her hand on her belly and the ghost of Damon's voice in her ear saying, "It's not my child," and have to sit up in bed and remind herself, "You are safe. You are safe. He doesn't know where you are. You are safe." But she made it. She made it through the first month and then the second. And by the time she was 12 weeks along, Elena Hart was a different woman than the one who had walked into Damon Vale's office with an ultrasound clutched against her chest. She was harder. She was quieter. She didn't smile as easily. She had learned to flinch at the sound of expensive cars and to keep her eyes down in crowds and to never ever post a single thing on the internet that could be traced back to her. She was alone. She was terrified. She was free. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, in the same penthouse where it had all happened, Damon Vale stood at the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand and watched the rain run down the city skyline. His phone was on the desk behind him. It had been 3 months. Marco came in quietly and cleared his throat. "Boss." Damon didn't turn around. "Boss, the doctor is here. He says it's important." "Send him in." The door opened, closed. There were footsteps. A man clearing his throat nervously, the faint rustle of paper. "Mr. Vale," said the doctor. His voice was thin. "Mr. Vale, there's something I need to tell you about your test results from 4 years ago. I don't know how to say this. There was an error, a clerical error. Your file was switched with another patient's. We didn't catch it until last week when we were updating our records, and The whiskey glass hit the floor. It didn't shatter. It just bounced once on the rug and rolled in a slow, uneven arc until it came to a stop against the leg of the desk, the amber liquid soaking into the white wool in a dark, spreading stain. Damon Vale did not move. "Mr. Vale, get out." "Sir, I want you to know that the clinic is fully prepared to get out." The doctor got out. The door closed behind him. And in the silence that followed, Damon Vale lifted both hands very slowly and pressed them against his face. And a sound came out of him that no one in his entire life had ever heard before. It was not a scream. It was not it was the sound of a man who had just realized that the worst thing he had ever done in his life in a life full of terrible things was the one thing he could never ever take back. He stood there for a long time. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were wet and his hands were shaking, and his voice when he spoke was a rasp. Marco. The door opened immediately. Boss, find her. Boss, find her. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what you have to do. You find Elena Hart, and you find my child, and you bring them home to me. Marco hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for Damon to look up and meet his eyes. Boss, Marco said carefully, it's been 3 months. She doesn't want to be found. Damon Vale stood up from his chair. He walked to the window. He pressed one hand flat against the cold glass and he watched the rain, and he said in a voice so quiet that Marco almost didn't hear it, I don't care what she wants. I'm her child's father, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making this right, even if she never forgives me. Do you understand me? Yes, boss. Find her, Marco. Yes, boss. The door clicked shut, and Damon Vale stood alone at the window watching the rain with the taste of whiskey and ash in his mouth, and somewhere deep inside his chest for the first time in a very long time, something that had been frozen for years began very slowly, very painfully to thaw. He didn't know it yet, but the hunt had begun, and the woman he was about to find again was not the same woman he had thrown away. The hunt had begun, but Elena Hart didn't know it. She was 3 states away, standing behind the counter of a small bookstore on Maple Street, ringing up a paperback for an old woman who was telling her for the 3rd time that week that she looked tired. You sure you're getting enough sleep, honey? Yes, ma'am. You look pale. I'm fine. You're eating right for 2 now. Elena managed a smile. Yes, ma'am, I promise. The old woman patted her hand and shuffled out the door, and Elena leaned against the counter and pressed both palms flat against her lower back and breathed out slowly. 5 months. She was 5 months along now. The bump was undeniable. She wore loose sweaters and aprons, and she had stopped pretending it was anything other than what it was because the women in this town were too kind and too nosy to let her get away with it. She had told them her name was Elena Bell. She had told them she was a widow. She had told them her husband had died in a car accident 6 months ago, and that she had moved here to start over. And the women in this town had wrapped their arms around that lie and held it close to their chests and brought her casseroles. They asked no questions. They let her cry in the back room when the hormones came on hard. They called her sweetheart and honey and baby girl, and Elena, who had grown up without a mother, who had been passed from foster home to foster home like an unwanted package, found herself standing in the break room some afternoons with tears running silently down her face because she had never in her entire life been taken care of like this. The bell over the door jingled. Elena, darling, I brought you a sandwich. It was Maeve, the owner, 62 years old, gray hair and a braid, hands like leather. Tuna salad. Don't argue with me. You barely touched lunch yesterday. Maeve, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Eat. Elena ate. And as she ate, sitting on the stool behind the counter, with her hand resting absently on her belly, she thought, I could do this. I could really do this. I could raise a daughter in this town. I could grow old here. I could die here, and the only people at my funeral would be these women who think my name is Belle, and that would be enough. That would be more than enough. She did not let herself think about Damon. She had trained herself over 5 months not to let herself think about Damon. She had a ritual for it. Whenever his face floated into her mind, whenever she remembered the warm weight of his arm across her stomach in the dark, whenever she remembered the way he laughed low and rare, and only for her she would close her eyes and count backwards from 10 and remind herself he tore up the picture. He called you a liar. He told you to disappear. He meant it. It worked. Most of the time it worked, but there were nights lying alone in the pale yellow nursery with one hand on her belly when she would feel the baby kick for the first time, and she would open her mouth to call out to him before she remembered, and the silence in the apartment would press down on her like a stone. On those nights, she would whisper to her daughter instead, Did you feel that, baby? You're getting strong. You're getting so strong. And she would not cry. She had run out of crying months ago. 300 miles away, Damon Vale was not sleeping. He had not slept properly in 3 months. He had been sleeping in 2-hour stretches at his desk with his phone in his hand waiting. Marco had a team of 6 men running every lead they could find, And so far, every single one of them had come back empty. Elena had been thorough. Elena had been terrifyingly thorough. There was no credit card trail. There was no bank account in her name. There was no flight she had taken, no train ticket, she had bought no hotel. She had stayed in. Her phone had been turned off the night she left and never turned back on. Her social media accounts had gone dark. Even her old email had been deleted, the password reset by someone who had clearly known what they were doing. Boss, Marco came into the office holding a tablet. We got a hit, maybe. Damon looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. His shirt was the same one he had been wearing the day before. Talk. Pawn shop in Newark. 3 months ago, a woman matching her description came in and pawned a ring. What ring? A diamond. 3 carats, cushion cut, engraved on the inside. Damon's jaw tightened. Engraved with what? Marco hesitated. With what, Marco? Forever yours, D. Damon closed his eyes. He had given her that ring 18 months ago on a Tuesday in the kitchen of her old apartment while she was making him eggs and laughing about something her coworker had said. He had not been planning to do it. He had been carrying the ring around in his pocket for 6 weeks waiting for the right moment, and then he had looked up from the table and seen her standing there in his shirt with her hair in a messy bun. And the words had just come out of his mouth before he knew he was saying them. Marry me, Elena. And she had dropped the spatula and said, what? And he had said, marry me, please, just marry me. And she had laughed and cried and said, yes, you idiot, of course, yes. And they had stood there in the kitchen holding each other while the eggs burned on the stove. And she had pawned the ring. She had pawned the ring for cash like it was nothing, like it had meant nothing. He understood in that moment what he had done to her. He had thought he understood before. He had told himself for 3 months that he understood, but he had not understood. Not really. Not until that moment with the image of her standing at a pawn shop counter in Newark, sliding 3 carats of his love across a sheet of bulletproof glass for a fraction of what it was worth just to get away from him. Boss, get the security footage. I tried, sir. The shop's cameras don't keep more than 90 days. What about traffic cams? Same problem. 3 months. It's all gone. Damon put both hands flat on the desk. He breathed in. He breathed out. He did not break anything, although he wanted to. He had stopped breaking things weeks ago because he had finally understood that breaking things would not bring her back. Only one thing could bring her back, and it was the thing he was the worst in the world at patience. Marco. Sir, pull the buyer information for that ring. Whoever bought it from the pawn shop, I want the ring back. Boss, that ring is going to cost you. I don't care. Yes, sir. And Marco. Yes, Damon's voice was quiet. When I find her, the ring is not for me to give back. It's for her to throw at me if she wants to. Do you understand? Marco nodded slowly. I understand, boss. The next hit came 2 weeks later. It came not from any of the 6 men Marco had hired. It came from a place none of them had thought to look. It came from a woman. Her name was Maggie Ortiz, and she had been Elena's best friend since the 7th grade. And she had spent the last 5.5 months lying through her teeth to anyone who came near her. She had lied to her husband. She had lied to her priest. She had lied to 2 private investigators, one of whom had offered her $10,000 in cash for a single word. She had not lied to her sister. And her sister had a boyfriend. And the boyfriend, it turned out, was an extremely small-time hustler who, when leaned on by extremely large men in a parking lot one night, had given up the only piece of information he had, that his girlfriend's sister had a friend named Elena who had disappeared, and that Maggie sent her a Christmas card every year to a P.O. box in a small town 3 states away. The men gave the boyfriend $2,000 and a warning to never speak of this conversation again. The boyfriend did not speak of it again. The men brought the address to Marco at 3 in the morning, and Marco brought it to Damon at 3:15. And by 3:30, Damon Vale was in the back of a black SUV heading to a private airfield. And by sunrise, he was 3 states away, in a small town with a single traffic light, sitting in a rental car across the street from a bookstore on Maple Street. He did not get out. He sat in the car for 6 hours. He watched her come out at noon to flip the sign from closed to open. He watched her bend down with one hand on her lower back and the other on her belly. And he watched her smile at an old man walking past, and he watched her press a hand to her face and laugh at something a teenage girl said as she went into the shop. And Damon Vale, who had not cried in 23 years, who had not cried at his own father's funeral, sat in a rented Toyota in a town he had never been to before, and put both hands over his face and wept. She was so big. That was what got him. That was what undid him completely. He had walked around for 3 months with the image of her in his head exactly as she had been the day she walked into his office. And he had told himself in some part of his mind he refused to look at directly that the baby was still some abstract thing, some idea, some concept. But she was huge. She was visibly, unmistakably, undeniably pregnant. There was a child in there, a real child, his child, a child that had been growing inside her every day for the past 3 months, while he had been drinking himself to sleep at his desk and screaming at Marco to find her. He couldn't go in. He sat in the car for another hour and he tried to make himself go in, and he could not make himself go in because every time he reached for the door handle, his hand started shaking, and he understood with a kind of slow horror that he was afraid. Damon Vale was afraid. He had stared down men with guns. He had walked into rooms where everyone in the room wanted him dead, and he could not, for the life of him, walk across a small town street and open the door of a bookstore and look the woman he loved in the eyes. So he didn't. He drove away. He came back the next day. He did this for 9 days. On the 10th day, Elena was closing up the shop alone. Maeve had gone to her grandson's birthday party. The sun was going down. The bell over the door jingled, and Elena, who was sorting receipts at the counter with her back to the door, called out without looking up, "I'm sorry, we're just closing." "Elena!" The pen fell out of her hand. It rolled across the counter and dropped onto the floor with a small, plastic, terrible sound, and Elena Hart stood with her back to the door of the bookstore and felt her entire body go cold from the inside out. She did not turn around. She could not turn around. "Elena!" His voice was hoarse. "Please, please look at me." Slowly, very slowly, she put her hand on her belly. She could feel her daughter moving in there, restless, kicking against her ribs, and something in that movement gave her the strength to do what she did next. She turned around. He looked terrible. That was the first thing she noticed. Damon Vale, the most powerful man in the city, looked like he had been run over by a truck. His eyes were sunk into his face. His suit was rumpled. He had not shaved. His hands were clenched at his sides like a man trying very hard not to fall to his knees. "How did you find me?" she said. It was not a question. It was a statement, flat dead. She already knew. It didn't matter. "Elena, how did you find me?" "Maggie's sister has a boyfriend," he said quietly. "He told someone. I'm sorry." She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She had run out of crying. She just stood there with her hand on her belly and felt her whole carefully constructed life cracking down the middle, and she said, "You need to leave." "Elena, I'm calling the police." "You're not calling the police. Watch me." She reached for the phone on the counter, and he took one step forward, and she said, "Don't." And he stopped immediately with both hands raised, palms out like a man approaching a wounded animal. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'm not moving. I'm not moving, Elena. Look at me. Look at me, please." She looked at him. "I know," he said. "I know what I did." "You don't know anything." "I do." "You don't," he said. "The doctor came to my office," he said, 3 weeks after you left. 3 weeks, Elena. He told me about the records. He told me they had switched the files. He told me that I had been wrong for 4 years and that the night you came to my office with that picture you were telling me the truth, and His voice broke. She had never heard it break before. "And I called you a liar," he whispered. "I called you a liar, and I tore up our daughter's picture, and I told you to get out." And Elena, he was shaking now, openly, shaking with both hands still raised. "Elena, I have been looking for you every single day for 3 months. I have not slept. I have not eaten. I have torn this country apart trying to find you. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I will never ask you to forgive me. I am asking you, I am begging you to let me try. Just let me try." For a long time, she didn't speak. She just looked at him, at the man she had loved, at the man who had broken her, at the man who was standing in her bookstore in her town in her life with tears running down his unshaven face and his hands raised like a beggar. And she understood with a clarity that surprised her that there was a part of her that wanted to walk across that floor and put her face against his chest and let him hold her. There was a part of her that had been waiting for this moment for 5 months. There was a part of her that had never stopped loving him, not for a single second, not even on the nights when she had hated him most. And she understood with the same clarity that she could not let that part of her win. Not yet. Not now. Maybe not ever. Damon, she said, her voice was very steady, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm listening. You are going to walk out of this store. You are going to get in your car. You are going to drive back to your hotel or your plane or wherever you came from. And you are not going to come near me again until I tell you that you can. Do you understand? Elena, do you understand? His jaw tightened. Yes, he said quietly. I understand. You are going to give me 3 days. 3 days, Damon, to think, to breathe, to decide what I want. And after 3 days, if I want to see you, I will call you. If I do not call you, you are going to leave this town and you are never going to come back. Are we clear? He was silent. Are we clear, Damon? Yes, his voice was almost a whisper. We're clear. Good. He didn't move. Elena, his voice cracked. Can I just see her? Just for a second, just the bump, just to know she's real. She looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly she lifted her sweater. Just a little, just enough. He made a sound she had never heard a grown man make. His knees actually buckled. He caught himself on the edge of a bookshelf and he stared at the curve of her belly with both hands pressed against his mouth, and the tears were running down his face, and he did not say anything. He just looked. He looked like a man looking at the sun for the first time in his life. She lowered her sweater. 3 days, Damon. 3 days, he whispered. He turned slowly like a man much older than he was, and he walked to the door and he paused with his hand on the handle and he did not turn around. Elena, don't. I love you. She closed her eyes. Get out, Damon. He got out. The bell jingled. The door clicked shut. And Elena Hart stood alone in the empty bookstore with one hand on her belly and one hand pressed flat against the counter to keep herself from falling, and she did not move for a very, very long time. When she finally moved, it was to lock the door. When she finally let herself feel anything, it was to slide down the wall onto the floor and sit there with her arms wrapped around her knees. And she stayed there until the sun went down and the streetlights came on, and her daughter kicked once hard against her ribs like she was saying, Mama, get up. Mama, we have to figure out what we're going to do now. And Elena Hart alone on the floor of a small bookstore in a town 3 states away from the life she had run from, whispered into the darkness, I don't know, baby. I don't know yet. Outside, the rental car was already gone, but somewhere in a hotel room 20 miles away, Damon Vale was sitting on the edge of a bed with his head in his hands waiting. He would wait 3 days. He would wait 3 years if she asked him to. He had made his decision. And the woman who would call him or not call him was no longer the woman he had thrown away in a penthouse office 5 months ago. She was someone else now, and he was about to find out exactly who. She was about to find out exactly who too. Elena Hart had not slept that night, and she had not slept the night after. And on the 3rd night, she sat at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning with a cup of decaf tea going cold in front of her, and her phone face down on the wood, and her hand pressed flat against her belly, and she waited for her daughter to tell her what to do. Her daughter did not tell her what to do. Her daughter just kicked and rolled and stretched and reminded her every few minutes that this was not a decision Elena got to make alone anymore. She used to be able to make decisions alone. She used to be able to be reckless and stupid and brave. She used to be able to walk away from things. She had walked away from Damon once, and it had nearly killed her, but she had done it, and she could do it again. She knew she could do it again, but could she do it for her daughter? Could she look her daughter in the eyes one day, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and tell her, I knew where your father was. I knew he wanted to know you. I knew he was begging me. And I said no. Could she live with that? She didn't know. She picked up the phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. Maggie answered on the 2nd ring. Elena, oh God, Elena, are you okay? I have been losing my mind. He found you, didn't he? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My sister's boyfriend, that little Maggie. That little weasel, I am going to kill him with my bare hands. I swear to God, Maggie. What? Tell me. Tell me what you need. Elena closed her eyes. He came to the bookstore. Silence. He came to the bookstore 3 days ago. He cried Maggie. He cried in front of me. He said he had been looking for me every day. He said the doctor came to him 3 weeks after I left and told him about the records. He said he was telling the truth back then when he denied her. He really thought he couldn't have kids. He really thought I was lying. Elena. He gave me 3 days to decide if I want to see him. The 3 days are up tomorrow. A long silence. Then Maggie said quietly, "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut tells me he's going to break my heart again." "And your head?" "My head tells me my daughter deserves a father." Maggie was quiet for a long time. "Elena," she said finally, "I am going to say something and you are going to hate me for it. Are you ready?" "Say it." "He is the most dangerous arm either of us has ever met. He runs half the city. He has hurt people, Elena. He has hurt a lot of people. And I love you and I will support whatever you decide, but I need you to promise me something." "What?" "I need you to promise me that you will not let him love bomb you back into that penthouse. Whatever you decide tomorrow, you decide it for that baby. Not for him, not for the way his voice sounds when he says your name, not for the way he used to make you laugh, for her. Do you understand me?" Elena's eyes filled. "Yes," she whispered, "promise me." "I promise." "Good. Now go to sleep, baby. You sound exhausted. Go to sleep and call me in the morning and we'll figure it out together." Elena did not go to sleep. She sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up, and at 6 in the morning she picked up the phone and she scrolled to the number Damon had left on a piece of paper at the counter of the bookstore 3 days earlier, and her thumb hovered over the green button for a long, long time. Then she pressed it. He picked up before the first ring finished. "Elena!" His voice was raw. He had clearly been awake. "Tomorrow," she said. 11 in the morning, the diner on 5th and Chestnut. You sit on one side of the booth, I sit on the other. There are people around. We talk for 1 hour. After that, I decide. Do you accept those terms? Yes. You don't argue, no. You don't bring Marco. You don't bring anyone. You come alone. I come alone. And Damon. Yes. If you lie to me again, even once, even about something small, we are done, forever. I will get a restraining order. I will move again. You will never see her. Do you understand? I understand. 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. She hung up. She sat there with the phone in her hand for a long time, and then she got up very carefully, and she walked to the bathroom and she threw up. He was already in the booth when she walked into the diner the next morning. He had on a plain gray sweater and jeans which she had never in her life seen him wear, and no watch. And his hair was a mess, and his hands were wrapped around a coffee cup like he was trying to keep them from shaking. He stood up when she came in. He didn't move from the booth. He just stood and he waited, and Elena walked across the diner with one hand on her belly and her chin up and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. And she sat down across from him and she said, "Sit." He sat. The waitress came over. Elena ordered tea. Damon ordered nothing. The waitress walked away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Damon said, "Thank you for calling." "I'm not here for you," Elena said. "I'm here for her." "I know. I want you to understand that." "I understand. I have rules." "Tell me." She had written them on a piece of paper that morning, but she didn't pull the paper out. She had memorized them. She had been rehearsing them in the mirror for 3 hours. "You will not move me. You will not buy me a house. You will not put me in some penthouse with security guards at the door. I live where I live. That is not negotiable." "Okay." "You will not pay for things without asking me. You will not show up with cars or jewelry or designer clothes or any of the things you used to do. If I want something, I will ask for it. If I don't ask, you don't buy it. Are we clear? We're clear. You will go to every doctor's appointment from now until she's born. Every single one. You miss one, we are done. I don't care if your business is on fire. I don't care if there's a war in the streets. You show up or you don't get to be in her life." His jaw tightened. "I will be there. You will not under any circumstances bring your business near her. I don't want your guys at her doctor's appointments. I don't want black SUVs in front of her school. I don't want her name to ever be in the same sentence as your name in any context that involves any of the things you do for a living. If she is ever in danger because of who you are, Damon, I will take her and disappear so completely that not even you will be able to find us. And this time I won't let myself get found. Elena, are we clear? We're clear. Last thing, her voice was very steady. We are not getting back together. He didn't move. Did you hear me, Damon? I heard you. I don't know what we are. I don't know what we will be. I don't know if I will ever be able to look at you and not see you tearing up that ultrasound. But I do know that we are not getting back together right now. And we may never get back together, and you don't get to ask me when, and you don't get to push me, and you don't get to give me sad eyes across a doctor's office and hope that I cave. Are we clear? His throat worked. We're clear. Good. She breathed out. Now talk to me. He talked. He talked for the full hour. He talked the way she had never heard him talk in 2 years of being together. He told her about the doctor, the records, the call, the moment the glass had hit the floor. He told her about the 3 months of looking. He told her about the pawn shop. He told her with his eyes on the table that he had bought the ring back and that it was sitting in a drawer in his hotel room and that he was not going to give it to her, that it was hers to do whatever she wanted with that. He would mail it to her or throw it in the river or hold it for their daughter's 18th birthday, whatever Elena decided. And then almost in a whisper, he told her about his father. She had never heard about his father. In 2 years, she had never heard about his father, and she had stopped asking because every time she asked, his face would close down like a steel door and he would change the subject. But now sitting in a diner booth across from her with his hands wrapped around a cold coffee cup, he told her. He told her that his father had been a violent drunk. He told her that his father had broken his arm twice before he was 9 years old. He told her that his father had told him on his 16th birthday with a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other that he had only ever had one regret in his life, and that regret was Damon, and that the world would have been a better place if Damon had never been born. He told her that when the doctor had told him 4 years ago that he could not have children, his first thought had not been grief. His first thought had been thank God, because he had been afraid his entire adult life of becoming his father. And the night Elena had walked into his office with that ultrasound in her hands, the floor had dropped out from under him because the one thing he had built his entire life around, the one comfort, the one certainty, the one reason he had let himself love her at all, had just been ripped away. And he had panicked. He had panicked and he had lashed out and he had told himself that she must be lying because the alternative was that he was going to be a father and he could not be a father. And he could not survive being a father because he was going to do to his child what his father had done to him. He knew it. He knew it. I was wrong, he said quietly. About all of it. About the records. About you. About me. I'm not him, Elena. I have spent my whole life being terrified that I'm him and I am not. I'm not him. I won't be him. I will spend the rest of my life proving I'm not him. To you, to her, to myself. Elena's hands were shaking. She put them flat on the table to stop them. Damon, yes, I am very, very sorry that happened to you. His eyes filled. But it doesn't fix what you did to me. I know. It doesn't even come close to fixing it. I know. And the fact that you didn't tell me any of this in 2 years, the fact that I had to find out about your father in a diner on the worst day of my life, that's another thing you did to me. Do you understand? I understand. She took a long breath. You can come to the appointments. His head jerked up. You can come to the appointments, she said again. Starting next Tuesday at 9. I'll text you the address. You will be there 15 minutes early. You will not touch me. You will not call me anything but Elena. You will not introduce yourself to my doctor as anything other than the baby's father. And when the appointment is over, you will go back to your hotel or your plane or wherever you go, and you will not contact me again until the next appointment. Are we clear? He nodded. He could not speak. Are we clear, Damon? Yes, he whispered. We're clear. Okay. She slid out of the booth slowly with one hand on her lower back. I have to go. I'm late for work. He stood up too. He did not reach for her. He just stood there with both hands at his sides, and he watched her walk to the door. And at the door she paused and she turned and she said, Damon. Yes. If you are 5 minutes late to that appointment, we are done. I won't be late. I mean it. I know you do. She left. She made it to the car before her legs gave out. She sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel, and she sobbed the way she hadn't sobbed in months, the way she hadn't let herself sob since the night in the diner with Ruth and the apple pie. She sobbed because she still loved him. She sobbed because she hated herself for still loving him. She sobbed because she had said all the right things, set all the right boundaries, drawn all the right lines. And underneath every single one of them was a woman who wanted more than anything in the world to walk back into that diner and put her face against his chest. She did not walk back into the diner. She drove to work. She rang up books. She smiled at customers. And on Tuesday morning at 8:45, she walked into the parking lot of her OB's office and saw a black rental sedan in the corner. And inside the sedan was Damon Vale alone in a sweater with no watch, with his hands on the wheel and his eyes closed. And when he saw her, he got out of the car immediately, and he did not smile, and he did not wave, and he did not approach her. He just walked 3 paces behind her into the office, and he sat in the chair next to hers in the waiting room with a respectful gap between them. And when the nurse called hard Elena, he stood up only when she stood up, and he followed her down the hallway, and he sat in the chair in the corner of the exam room like a man trying very hard to take up as little space as possible. The doctor came in. She looked at Damon. She looked at Elena. "You must be the dad," the doctor said. "Yes," Damon said quietly. "I am." The doctor nodded. She smiled. She squeezed gel onto Elena's belly. She moved the wand, and the room filled up suddenly with a sound that Elena had heard at every appointment for 5 months and had never, ever gotten used to. A fast, urgent galloping sound. Her daughter's heartbeat. Damon made a sound. Elena turned her head slowly to look at him. He was sitting in this corner chair with both hands pressed against his mouth and his eyes closed, and he was crying the way she had seen him cry exactly 3 times in her entire life. Without sound, without movement, just tears pouring down his face while he tried and failed to not fall apart in front of her doctor. The doctor pretended not to notice. The doctor moved the wand. "There she is," the doctor said softly. "Look at her mom. Look at her dad. She's measuring perfectly. She's right on track. She's beautiful." Damon lowered his hands. "Can I?" His voice broke. He cleared his throat. "Can I see?" The doctor smiled. She turned the screen toward him. He looked. He looked at his daughter for the first time. He looked at her on the screen with her tiny hand near her face and her heartbeat hammering in the speaker and her whole small life going on inside the woman he had spent 5 months tearing the country apart trying to find. And Damon Vale, who had killed men, who had ordered men killed, who had walked into rooms and changed the entire balance of a city by walking out of them, sat in a corner chair in a small-town doctor's office and cried like a man at the end of a long, long road. Elena watched him. She did not reach for him, but she did not look away either. When the appointment was over, he walked her to her car. He did not touch her. He did not ask to. At her car, he stopped 3 paces back and he said, "Elena." "Yes. Thank you." She nodded. "Same time next week," she said. "Same time next week." He turned to walk back to his car, and she said, "Damon." He turned back. She held out her hand. "The picture," she said. He looked at her for a moment, and then he reached into his jacket, and he pulled out the small, printed ultrasound the nurse had given him at the door, and he handed it to her, and she said, "Take a picture of it on your phone." He looked at her. He did not understand. She said very quietly, "You don't get to lose this one. Take a picture." His eyes filled again. He took a picture. She took the original out of his hand. "I'll see you next Tuesday, Damon." "I'll be there, Elena." She got in her car. He watched her drive away. And as she drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand pressed flat against her belly, Elena Hart looked at the ultrasound on the passenger seat next to her and whispered to her daughter, "Okay, baby. Okay, we're going to try. Just a little. Just enough. We are going to be very, very careful. But we are going to try." In the parking lot behind her, Damon Vale stood with his phone in his hand and looked at the photograph he had just taken of the daughter he had nearly thrown away, and he made a vow to himself that he had never in his entire life made to anyone. Not to his men, not to his bosses, not to the woman he had loved for 2 years and lost. He made it to a baby he had not yet met, and he meant it more than he had ever meant anything. He meant it more than he had ever meant anything, and he was about to be tested. The next Tuesday, Damon was in the parking lot at 8:30. The Tuesday after that, he was there at 8:20. By the fourth Tuesday, Elena pulled in at 8:45 and saw him already standing by his car with 2 cups of decaf in his hand, one for him, one for her, and she rolled her window down and said, "I told you not to bring me things." "It's not a thing," he said. "It's coffee. They had it at the hotel. I would have thrown the second one away." "Damon." "Elena, please, just take it." She took it. She did not thank him. He did not expect her to. That was how it went, week after week. He did not push. He did not ask. He showed up 15 minutes early every single time, and he sat in the corner chair, and he listened to the doctor, and he asked careful, practical questions in a voice she had never heard him use before. Is the baby's weight where it should be? Should we be worried about the swelling in her ankles? Is there anything I can do to help her sleep better? And every time the doctor turned the screen, he leaned forward. Not too far, just enough, and he looked at his daughter like a man looking at a miracle. Elena watched him in the reflection of the dark monitor. She did not let him see her watching, but she watched. By the 7th week, she was 31 weeks pregnant, and the nights had gotten harder. Her back ached. She couldn't get comfortable. She woke up 4 or 5 times a night, gasping with her daughter pressing against her ribs from the inside, and she would lie in the dark with one hand on her belly and try to breathe through it, and she would think, despite herself, about him, about his hands, about the way he used to put his palm flat between her shoulder blade when she couldn't sleep in another life, in another bed, and just hold it there until her breathing slowed down. She hated that she missed it. She hated that she missed him. She told herself every morning when she woke up, you can miss him and still not let him back in. Those two things are not the same. Missing him is a feeling. Letting him back in is a choice. You don't have to make the choice just because you have the feeling. It worked. Most days it worked. And then came the Tuesday it stopped working. She walked into the doctor's office that morning and sat down on the table, and the doctor took her blood pressure and frowned. She took it again. She frowned harder. She left the room. She came back with another nurse. They took it a third time. "Elena," the doctor said carefully, "I need you to stay calm. Okay, your blood pressure is very high." "How high?" "High enough that we need to talk about preeclampsia." The word landed in the room like a stone. Damon, who had been sitting very still in the corner, sat up. "What does that mean?" he said. "It means we need to do some tests," the doctor said. "It means Elena needs to be on bed rest starting today. It means no work, no stress, no driving long distances. It means we are going to monitor her very closely for the rest of this pregnancy. And if her numbers don't come down, we are going to have to talk about delivering early." "How early?" Elena whispered. The doctor's voice was gentle. "It depends. Maybe a week, maybe 2. We're going to do everything we can to give her more time. But Elena, I need you to understand, this is serious. If we don't manage this, it can be very dangerous. For you, for the baby." Elena couldn't breathe. The room was tilting. She had built a whole life by herself. She had a job. She had an apartment. She had a paycheck that came in every 2 weeks and a lease that she paid on time and a small, careful, hard-won independence. And the doctor was saying no work, like it was a small thing, like Elena could just stop, like there was somebody waiting in the wings to pay her rent and stock her fridge and drive her to appointments, and a hand closed around hers. She looked down. It was Damon's hand. She did not pull away. She didn't squeeze back either. She just let her hands sit there inside his, and she stared at the floor and tried to remember how to breathe. "Dr. Damon said," and his voice was very calm, the voice he used when he was making things happen. "What does she need?" The doctor listed it. Bed rest, daily blood pressure checks, a nurse ideally who could come in and out, pre-positioned arrangements with the hospital, someone who could be there day and night in case anything happened. "She'll have it," Damon said. "Damon," Elena said quietly. "All of it," Damon said to the doctor. "Damon." He turned to look at her, up on her. His eyes were calm, his jaw was set. He was not looking at her like a man asking permission. He was looking at her like a man telling her very gently that this was no longer up for negotiation. "Elena," he said, and his voice was low, "I am going to do whatever you tell me to do. If you tell me to leave, I will leave. If you tell me to hire a stranger to do this, I will hire a stranger. But I'm not going to sit in a hotel 20 miles away while you and our daughter are in trouble. So you tell me, You tell me right now. What do you want? She opened her mouth. She closed it. She had a speech ready. She had had a speech ready for 6 weeks. You don't get to swoop in. You don't get to play the hero. You don't get to use a crisis to climb back into my life. But she looked at him, and she looked at the doctor, and she looked down at her own swollen hands, and she understood with a clarity that made her stomach turn that the speech was for the version of her that wasn't sick. This version was sick. This version was scared. This version had a daughter who needed her to make the smart call, not the proud one. You can stay in town, she said quietly. You cannot move into my apartment. You can rent something nearby. You can drive me to appointments. You can bring me groceries. You can be there if something happens. Okay. You don't sleep at my place. Okay. You don't try anything. Elena, his voice cracked just slightly. I'm not trying anything. I'm just trying to keep you alive. She closed her eyes, she nodded. He squeezed her hand just once, just barely, and then he let go. He rented a one-bedroom apartment in her building. He did it that afternoon. He paid in cash. He told the landlord his name was Daniel Bell, and he had a temporary job in town, and he would be there for 2 months, possibly more. He brought up 2 suitcases and a coffee maker and nothing else because Elena had told him not to make it a home, and he was, for the first time in his life, doing exactly what he was told. He was 3 doors down from her. He could hear her television through the wall sometimes. He never knocked. He texted every morning at 8, I'm up, I have coffee, I'm coming to take your blood pressure in 15 minutes. And every morning at 8:15, she opened her door, and he came in with the cuff and the little machine the doctor had given them, and he wrapped it around her arm and pressed the button and watched the numbers, and he wrote them in a small black notebook he had bought specifically for that purpose. And he gave her the reading in a calm, businesslike voice, and then he left. He did not stay. He did not try to. By the end of the first week, the numbers were holding steady. By the end of the second week, they had started to come down. And on the 15th night at 3 a.m, Elena Hart woke up gasping with a hand pressed against her ribs and a sharp twisting pain shooting through her lower back. And she sat up in bed and she could not catch her breath. She fumbled for her phone. Her hands were shaking too hard to type. She pressed the button for him without thinking. He picked up on the first ring. Elena. Damon. She could not get the words out. Damon, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. The pain. I'm coming. Don't move, baby. I'm coming. He was at her door in less than a minute. She had given him a key on day 3 in a moment of weakness she had been arguing with herself about ever since, and he used it now. And he was at her bedside in seconds with his phone already pressed to his ear, dialing the doctor and his other hand on her back, holding her up, and his voice in her ear was steady and low and calm. Breathe with me, Elena. In, out, in, out. The doctor's on the line. We're going to the hospital. I have you. You're okay. You're okay. She gripped his arm. She did not let go. He carried her down the stairs. He carried her to his car. He drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand wrapped around hers, and he talked to her the entire way to the hospital, telling her about anything he could think of, anything to keep her awake, anything to keep her present. The weather, the road, a stupid thing Marco had said on the phone that morning, the color of the streetlights. He talked and she breathed. And somewhere in the second mile, she realized she was crying, and she didn't know when she had started. Damon, I'm here. Don't let her die. His voice broke. She's not going to die, Elena. She is not going to die. I won't let her. Do you hear me? I will not let her. The hospital, the wheelchair, the nurse running, the doctor in scrubs who had been called 20 minutes ago and was already there. Elena, we need to deliver. Right now. I'm only 33 weeks. I know. The baby is in distress. We can't wait. We're going to take very good care of her, but we have to go right now. Elena turned her head. She found his eyes. Damon, I'm coming with you. Sir, you can't. I am coming with her. The doctor looked at the nurse. The nurse looked at Damon. Something in the set of his face must have made the decision for them, because the nurse said, get him scrubs, now. He stood beside her in scrubs with a mask over his face, and he held her hand while they put the curtain up, and he held her hand while they cut, and he held her hand when she said very quietly, Damon, I'm scared. And he leaned down close to her ear and he whispered, I know, baby. I know. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. And then a sound, a small, thin, furious sound, the cry of a very tiny, very angry, very alive baby girl. Elena closed her eyes and the tears ran sideways down her face into her ear. And Diamond made a sound that was not a word, that was not language, that was the sound of a man who had spent his entire adult life believing he could not have what he was hearing it. She's small, the doctor said. She's very small. We're going to take her to the NICU. But she is breathing. She is breathing, Mom and Dad. She is breathing. They held her up for 1 second, for one heartbeat. Damon looked at his daughter. His daughter looked at the world. And then they took her away. Elena's hand tightened around his. Go with her. Elena. Damon, go with her. Don't leave her alone. She doesn't know anybody yet. Go. He hesitated. Go, she whispered. I'll be okay. I have these people. She doesn't have anyone. Go. He went. He went and he stood outside the NICU window with his hands pressed against the glass, and he watched a nurse settle his 3-pound, 11-ounce daughter into an incubator, and he watched them put tiny wires on her chest and a tiny tube near her tiny mouth, and he stood there with his face wet and his heart pounding, and he made his second vow. The first one had been for who he wouldn't be. This one was for who he would. He stayed at the window for 2 hours. He did not move. A nurse brought him a chair. He didn't sit in it. Another nurse kinder gently put a hand on his arm and said, Sir, your wife is asking for you. He didn't correct her on the wife. He went. Elena was in a recovery room. Her eyes were closed. Her face was gray. There was an IV in her arm and a heart monitor beeping steadily next to her bed. He sat down in the chair by the bed and he took her hand and he pressed his forehead against the back of her hand and he stayed there. After a long time, she said without opening her eyes, Is she okay? She's okay. She's small. She's in the NICU. They said she's breathing on her own. They said she's a fighter. She gets that from her mother. Yeah, he whispered. She does. A long silence. Then Elena said very quietly, Damon. Yes. You came in less than a minute. I would have come in 0 seconds if I could have. You stayed at the window for 2 hours. I would have stayed at that window for 2 years, Elena. 2 decades. I would have died at that window. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. And for the first time in 9 months, she looked at him the way she used to look at him, and his throat closed up and he could not speak. Damon. Yes. You did good today. His eyes filled. I'm going to keep doing good, Elena, every day, for the rest of my life, I swear to you. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly, I know. She didn't say I forgive you. She didn't say I love you. She didn't say come home. She just said I know, and he understood in that one word that something had shifted, that some small, hard frozen thing inside her had cracked, that she was not opening the door, but she was no longer holding it shut with both hands. That was enough. That was more than enough. He kissed the back of her hand, just once, just barely, and she did not pull away. 3 weeks later, their daughter came home. They named her Hope. Elena had picked the name in the second trimester alone in a yellow bedroom, and she had not told anyone, not even Maggie, until the night before she was born. Damon had cried when she told him. He had said it was the most beautiful name he had ever heard. He had said it 20 times under his breath in the NICU, leaning over the incubator. Hope, Hope. You are doing so good, Hope. Daddy is right here, Hope. They brought her home in a car seat that he had installed himself with the instructions printed out and laid on the passenger seat next to him, and he had made Elena double-check it before they left the hospital because he had read on the internet that most car seats are installed wrong, and he was not about to be one of those statistics. Elena had laughed at him. It was the first time she had laughed in front of him in months. He did not move into her apartment. He stayed in his. But the door between them stopped being locked. He came over in the morning to bring coffee and to hold the baby while Elena showered. He came over in the evening to make dinner badly because he had never cooked a meal in his life before this, and he was learning from YouTube videos he watched at 3 in the morning on his phone. He learned how to swaddle. He learned how to burp. He learned how to mix formula at exactly the right temperature, and how to test it on the inside of his wrist, and how to hold a tiny sleeping baby against his chest with one hand cupped under her bottom and one hand flat against her back, and to walk slow circles around the living room. humming under his breath while Elena slept on the couch. He did all of this in jeans and sweaters. He did not wear a suit. He did not wear a watch. He went back to the city twice both times for less than 24 hours, and he came back faster each time with circles under his eyes, with a bag full of formula and diapers, and a small pink stuffed elephant for Hope that Elena pretended to roll her eyes at and then quietly tucked into the corner of the crib. And one night, 6 weeks after Hope came home, Elena was sitting on the couch with the baby asleep on her chest, and Damon was sitting on the other end of the couch, and he had his hand resting on the cushion between them, and Elena, without thinking about it, without planning it, without rehearsing it in the mirror for 3 hours, reached over and put her hand on top of his. He did not move. He did not breathe. He just looked at their hands. "Damon," she said softly. "Yes." "I'm not saying yes. I know. I'm not saying anything yet. I know, Elena. Her voice was quiet. "I'm just saying I'm tired, and you're here, and our daughter is asleep. And I'm holding your hand, that's all. That's all I'm saying." He turned his hand over very slowly and laced his fingers through hers. "That's enough," he whispered. "That's more than enough. You take all the time you need, Elena. I'll be right here. I'll be right here for the rest of my life." Her thumb brushed across the back of his hand. She didn't speak again. And outside the window, the snow began to fall very slowly and somewhere very far away, in a city he had not been back to in 3 months. The world Damon Vale had once ruled was beginning to ask, in low, dangerous voices, where their boss had gone and what he was doing, and whether he was ever coming back, and whether somebody else might want to step into the empty chair he had left behind. Whether somebody else might want to step into the empty chair he had left behind. The first call came on a Sunday. Damon was in Elena's kitchen with Hope strapped to his chest in a soft fabric carrier, stirring a pot of soup he was almost positive he was ruining when his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced down. Marco. He had not heard from Marco in 11 days. He had told Marco not to call him unless somebody was dead. He picked up the phone. "Marco." "Boss?" Marco's voice was tight. "We have a problem." Damon turned slowly away from the stove. He kept his voice low because Hope was asleep against his chest and Elena was in the next room. "Talk." "Vincent is making moves." Damon closed his eyes. Vincent, his second in command for 9 years. The man he had pulled out of a gutter at 22 and given a life to. The man who had stood next to him at every meeting, every sit-down, every closed-door conversation that mattered. The man who 3 months ago had told Damon with a hand on his shoulder, "Take all the time you need, brother. I got the family." What kind of moves? He's been meeting, quietly, with people who shouldn't be in the same room with him. He's telling them you're not coming back. He's telling them the chair is empty. He's telling them he's the one to fill it. Damon breathed out slow. "How long?" 6 weeks near as I can tell. I should have caught it sooner. I'm sorry, boss." "How bad is it?" "Bad. He's got at least 4 of the captains, maybe 5. He's promising them territory. He's promising them protection. He's promising them that things will be like they used to be before you got—" Marco hesitated. "Before you got soft." Damon looked down at the top of his daughter's head against his chest. She was so warm. She smelled like baby shampoo and milk, and that particular specific smell that babies had that nobody had ever told him about, that he had not known existed until 5 weeks ago, and that he now understood was the smell of his entire reason for being alive. "Boss?" "I heard you, Marco. What do you want me to do?" For a long moment, Damon did not answer. He put one hand very gently on the back of his daughter's head, and he felt the soft fuzz of her hair under his palm, and he felt her breathing against his ribs, in and out, and he thought about a city 300 miles away that he had ruled for 16 years. He thought about the men in that city. He thought about the things he had done in that city. He thought about Elena in the next room who had told him on day 1 in a diner booth, "If she is ever in danger because of who you are, I will take her and disappear so completely that not even you will be able to find us." And he made the 3rd vow of his life. "Marco." "Yes, I'm out." A silence. A silence so long he thought the line had dropped. "Boss." "I'm out, Marco. Listen to me. I'm not coming back. Not to fight Vincent. Not to take the chair back. Not for any of it. He wants it. He can have it. I'm done." "Boss, you can't just—" "I can. I am. I'm done. They will come for you. You know they will come for you. The minute you walk away, everyone you ever crossed is going to remember they crossed you. Vincent will not let you live in peace, boss. He can't afford to. The minute people think you're soft, they think his throne is soft and Marco. And you have a baby, boss, a baby. You can't just... Marco. Damon's voice did not rise. It dropped, lower, quieter. The voice that used to make grown men go pale. Marco, shut up. Listen to me very carefully, Damon said. I am going to give you a list. On that list will be every name, every account, every property, every piece of leverage I have ever held. You are going to take that list. You are going to walk into Vincent's house tomorrow morning. You are going to hand it to him. You are going to tell him that I am gone and that I am never coming back, and that in exchange for him leaving me and mine alone for the rest of our lives, I am giving him everything. The whole thing. Every dollar, every building, every man, the whole empire. He gets it all. He just has to leave us alone. Marco was breathing hard. Boss, he won't take that deal. He will think it's a trick. Then you will convince him it isn't. You will give him my word. And Marco, his voice softened, you will tell him that if he comes from my family even once, even at the edges, even in a whisper, I will stop being a man who walked away. And he knows what I am when I am not a man who's walked away. He knows. Make sure he remembers. Marco was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, Boss, what do you want me to do after? Damon closed his eyes. After, he said softly, I want you to take care of yourself. I want you to take the money I'm wiring to your account tonight, and I want you to disappear. Anywhere, somewhere warm, somewhere I will never know about, because if I know about it, somebody can make me say it. You go, Marco. You take your mother. You go. A small sound on the other end of the line. Boss, you have been a good friend, Marco. The only one I had. Thank you. Damon. Yeah. That little girl's lucky. Damon's throat closed. Yeah, he whispered. She is. He hung up. He stood in Elena's kitchen with his daughter against his chest and his hand on the back of her tiny head, and he stared at the soup he was definitely ruining, and he understood with a clarity that did not frighten him at all that he had just given away everything he had spent his entire adult life building. 16 years, hundreds of millions of dollars, the fear of an entire city. He had given it away in under 6 minutes in a kitchen in a town nobody had ever heard of while wearing a sweater. He felt lighter than he had felt in 20 years. Elena came in. She had Hope's bottle in one hand and a pacifier in the other, and she was wearing one of his old t-shirts that she had absolutely not asked permission to take, and she stopped in the doorway, and she looked at him and she said, Who was on the phone? Marco. Is everything okay? He looked at her for a long, long moment, and then he said very quietly, I just gave away the family. She went very still. Damon, what did you do? I gave it to Vincent. All of it. The whole thing. I told him to leave us alone, and in exchange, he gets everything I had. Damon, I'm out, Elena. For real. I'm not the boss of anything anymore. His voice cracked. I'm just a guy who lives in a 1-bedroom apartment 3 doors down from you, who can't make soup. Her eyes filled. Damon, you can't. I can. I did. It's done. They will come for you. Marco will handle it. Damon, you are not safe. Elena, his voice was low. He shifted Hope a little closer against his chest. I am holding our daughter. I am standing in your kitchen. I have not been this safe in my entire life. She crossed the room. She put one hand on his chest just above where Hope was sleeping. Her other hand came up and cupped the side of his face, and her thumb brushed across his cheekbone, and Damon Vale, who had given away an empire that morning to stand in a kitchen with a sweater on and a baby on his chest, leaned into her hand and closed his eyes. You stupid man, Elena whispered. I know. You stupid, stupid man. I know. You did that for us. I did that for her, and for you, and finally for me. Elena pressed her forehead against his. She didn't kiss him. She didn't say, I love you. She didn't say, come home. But she stayed there. For a long time she stayed there. And in his chest, between her hand and his shirt, their daughter sighed in her sleep and pressed her face a little harder against his heart, like she had heard the whole conversation and approved. The threats came. Of course they came. 3 days later, a black SUV rolled slowly down their street at 6 in the morning. Damon saw it from his window. He did not move. He watched it pass. He watched it turn at the end of the block. He watched it leave. He picked up his phone. He called Marco. Was that yours? That was a check-in. Vincent wanted to make sure you were where I said you were. And he told them to leave. He took the deal, boss. He took it with both hands. He couldn't believe his luck. He said to tell you, Marco's voice cracked just slightly. He said to tell you thank you, and he said he would honor it. You believe him. I believe him until he gives me a reason not to. Marco. Yes. Where are you? Boss, you told me not to tell you. You're right, I did. Forget I asked. A small, choked laugh on the other end. Take care of yourself, Damon. Take care of that little girl. You too, brother. He hung up. He never heard from Marco again. He chose every day to believe that meant Marco was alive somewhere warm with his mother, with his feet up, with the sun on his face. He chose to believe it because the alternative was a thing he could not carry while also being a father. And he had decided on the day Hope was born that he was going to be a father first and a man with regrets second. The check-ins continued for a few months. A black SUV, a man at a gas station watching Damon pump gas, a car parked across the street from the bookstore for an afternoon. Then they stopped. By the time Hope was 8 months old, they had stopped completely. By the time she was a year old, Damon was certain they were not coming back. Vincent was running the city. The city was not coming for them. The deal was holding. And Damon Vale, who had once owned a penthouse on the top floor of a building he had also owned, was working at a hardware store on Maple Street, 3 blocks from Elena's bookstore, helping old men pick out the right size of plumbing pipe and helping young mothers reach things on high shelves and getting paid $16 an hour and coming home every night to a 1-bedroom apartment that had very gradually, very quietly started to feel less like his apartment and more like a place he stopped at, sometimes between meals at Elena's. The hand-holding had progressed, slowly, painfully slowly by the standards of any other couple, but exactly the right speed for them. The hand on the couch had become a hand at the kitchen table. The hand at the kitchen table had become a hand on her back when she was washing dishes. The hand on her back had become one night very late when Hope was finally asleep and they were both half asleep on the couch in front of an old movie. Neither of them was watching an arm around her shoulders. She had not pulled away. She had leaned into him, and he had pressed his face into her hair, and he had whispered, Elena. Yes, I love you. She had been quiet for a long time. Then she had said, I know. She did not say it back. She did not say it back for another 4 months. He did not push. He did not ask. He told her every day in small ways, in big ways, I am here. I am not leaving. I do not need you to say anything. I just need you to know that I love you and that I am going to keep loving you and that whatever you decide is what I will live with. And then one Tuesday night in late October, Hope was 13 months old and she took her first steps. She had been pulling up on the coffee table for weeks. She had been walking, holding on to fingers for days. But that Tuesday night in the living room, she let go of the coffee table and she stood there swaying with her arms out, with her eyes huge, and she looked at Damon, who was on his knees 3 feet away, and she took one wobbly step, and then another, and then a third, and on the third step she fell forward into his arms, and he caught her and he lifted her over his head. And he laughed, and Hope laughed, the deep belly laugh of a child who has just realized she can do something brand new. And Damon Vale spun his daughter around the living room in his stocking feet, and he was for one bright, perfect, weightless second, the happiest man who had ever lived. When he turned around, Elena was crying. She was standing in the doorway with one hand pressed against her mouth and tears running down her face, and he stopped immediately, and he set Hope down, and he said, Elena, what? I love you. He went very still. What did you say? I love you, Damon. Her voice broke. I love you. I have loved you the entire time. I have loved you every single day since the day you walked into that bookstore. I have loved you since before that. I never stopped. I tried to. I really tried. But I never stopped. And I am tired, Damon. I am so tired of pretending I don't. He crossed the room in 3 steps. He took her face in both hands. Say it again. I love you. Say it again, Elena. I love you, I love you, I love you. He kissed her. He kissed her the way he had been wanting to kiss her for 16 months, gently, carefully, like she was something that could break, and she kissed him back, and she fisted both hands in the front of his shirt, and she pulled him closer. And Hope, who was sitting on the floor between their feet, looked up at her parents with the mild interest of a 13-month-old who had decided that walking was much more interesting and went back to trying to take another step. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was laughing. She was laughing and crying at the same time. Damon, yes. I'm not asking you to marry me again. The old ring is not on my hand. I am not the woman who said yes to that ring. That woman is gone. I know. But there is a woman standing in this living room who would say yes to a different ring, to a different man, to a different life, if he ever asked. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said very quietly, "Will you give me a minute?" He walked into the bedroom. He came back with a small black box. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Damon, what? It's not the old one. He opened it. Inside was a small, simple, plain gold band. No diamond, nothing flashy, just a thin circle of gold that looked like a thing a regular man would buy. I bought it 8 months ago. I've been carrying it around. I was waiting. I figured if you ever told me you loved me, I would ask. And if you never told me you loved me, I would just keep carrying it for the rest of my life. Either way was fine. Either way was a gift. Her eyes were full. You stupid, stupid man. Will you marry me, Elena? Yes. You're sure? I'm sure. You can take a minute. Damon, I am sure. I have been sure. Put the ring on my hand. He put the ring on her hand. It fit. Of course it fit. He had been carrying it for 8 months. They were married 4 months later in a courthouse with Maeve from the bookstore and the manager of the hardware store in Hope in a tiny white dress as their 3 witnesses. Elena did not wear a veil. Damon did not wear a tux. He wore a sweater. She wore a sweater. They held Hope between them when they said their vows, and Hope, who was almost a year and a half old, said very loudly in the middle of the judge's speech, "Dada!" and pointed at Damon, and the entire courthouse laughed. And the judge had to wait a full minute before he could continue. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Damon kissed his wife. Then he kissed his daughter. Then he kissed his wife again. He never went back to the city. He never wore a watch worth more than $50 again. He worked at the hardware store for 19 years, and then he bought it from the owner when the owner retired, and he ran it for another decade. And Elena ran the bookstore until she was 64, and Hope grew up in a small town with a mother who had given up an old life and a father who had given up a worse one, and she never knew until she was 22 and asked the right question on the right night, that the man who had taught her to ride a bike and read her bedtime stories and walked her down the aisle had once been the most feared man in a city 300 miles away. When Hope asked on that night why he had given it all up, Damon Vale, 64 years old with gray in his hair and a daughter's hand in his hand, looked at her for a long moment, and then he said very quietly, "Because the day I held you, I understood that everything I had been afraid of being was a story I had been telling myself. And the day I gave it all up, I understood that everything I had been afraid of losing was something I had never really had." He squeezed her hand. "And the day I married your mother, I understood that I had been a very lucky man my whole life who had spent most of that life not knowing it." Hope cried, he cried. They sat together in the kitchen of the small house on Maple Street that he had bought with money he had earned dollar by dollar with his own hands, and he told her everything. The penthouse, the ultrasound, the torn picture, the diner, the pawn shop, the doctor, the phone call to Marco, the empty chair he had walked away from, the gold ring he had carried for 8 months. All of it. And when he was done, his daughter put her arms around him and she said into his shoulder, "Dad, yeah, baby, you were never him." "I know," he whispered. "I know that now." He had built a life. He had built it with his own hands, in a small bin, in a sweater with a woman who had every right to walk away and chose not to, and a daughter who would never in her entire life be afraid of him. He had been wrong about almost everything. He had been right about one thing on one Tuesday morning in a parking lot when he had made a vow to a baby he had not yet met. He had kept that vow. Every single day for the rest of his life, he had kept that vow. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the whole story.